The hotel stood at the end of a long, winding road, shrouded in a dense fog that seemed to cling to the ancient stone walls like a living, breathing entity. It was an old Victorian mansion converted into a hotel, the kind you see in black and white photographs, standing solemn and majestic against the bleak sky. I arrived late in the evening, the only guest checking in that night, or so the receptionist told me. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes sunken, as if sleep had eluded her for years. The lobby was a grand affair, with high ceilings and chandeliers that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in decades. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and something else I couldn't quite place. A sense of unease settled over me, but I brushed it off. I was tired from the long drive and just wanted to get to my room and sleep. The receptionist handed me a key, an actual metal key, not the electronic cards most hotels use these days. Room 217. I thanked her and headed up the grand staircase. Each step creaked ominously under my weight, echoing through the empty halls. The hallway on the second floor was dimly lit, the old-fashioned sconces casting long, flickering shadows. I found my room at the end of the corridor. As I unlocked the door, a cold draft blew past me, sending a shiver down my spine. I stepped inside, the heavy door closing behind me with a soft click. The room was surprisingly large, furnished with dark, heavy furniture that looked as old as the building itself. A four-poster bed dominated the space, its canopy draped with dusty velvet curtains. There was an antique dresser, a writing desk, and a large window with thick, dark curtains drawn tightly shut. I set my bag down and went to pull the curtains open, but they wouldn't budge. They seemed almost glued to the wall. Sighing, I turned back to the bed and started to unpack. As I was hanging my clothes in the old wardrobe, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. I froze, straining to listen. The whispering continued, just on the edge of hearing, like a distant conversation. I couldn't make out any words, but the tone was unmistakably anxious. I walked to the door and opened it, peering down the empty hallway. Nothing. I shook my head, blaming my tired mind for playing tricks on me, and closed the door again. I finished unpacking and decided to take a quick shower before bed. The bathroom was as old-fashioned as the rest of the hotel, with a clawfoot tub and a cracked porcelain sink. The water was lukewarm at best, but I didn't mind. I just wanted to wash off the grime of the road. As I stood under the weak stream of water, I heard the whispering again, louder this time. It seemed to be coming from just outside the bathroom door. I turned off the water and listened, heart pounding. The whispering stopped. Wrapping a towel around myself, I cautiously opened the door and stepped into the bedroom. It was empty. Everything was exactly as I had left it. I shook my head, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. I dressed quickly and climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. The mattress was surprisingly comfortable, and despite my unease, I felt my eyes growing heavy. I woke to the sound of someone crying. It was a soft, pitiful sound, like a child lost and afraid. I sat up, heart racing, and listened. The crying was coming from the hallway. I slipped out of bed and tiptoed to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. The crying continued, growing fainter, as if whoever it was moving away. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The air was colder here, and the crying had almost faded to nothing. I followed the sound, my bare feet silent on the old carpet. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the sconces casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. I reached the end of the hall, where a narrow staircase led up to the attic. The crying was louder here, more desperate. I hesitated, my hand on the banister. Something told me to turn back, to return to the safety of my room. But curiosity won out. I had to know what was up there. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking loudly in the silence. The attic door was slightly ajar, and as I pushed it open, a rush of cold air hit me. The attic was dark, the only light coming from a small, dirty window at the far end. The crying had stopped. I stepped inside, my eyes slowly adjusting to the gloom. The attic was filled with old furniture covered in dust sheets and boxes piled haphazardly. I walked cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I approached the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the corner, half hidden behind a stack of boxes, was a small child. Her clothes were old-fashioned, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She raised a hand, pointing behind me. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. Standing in the doorway was a tall figure, its face hidden in shadow. The air grew colder, and the sense of malevolence was palpable. The figure stepped forward, and I stumbled back, my foot catching on a loose floorboard. I fell, hitting my head on the corner of a box. Pain exploded in my skull, and my vision blurred. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the child's terrified face and the dark figure looming over me. I woke in the hospital, my head bandaged and my body aching. The doctors told me I was found unconscious at the bottom of the attic stairs by the receptionist, who had come to check on me when I hadn't answered my phone. They said I was lucky to be alive, but I didn't feel lucky. I felt haunted. I left the hotel as soon as I was discharged, vowing never to return. But the memories stayed with me, the whispers in the dark, the crying child, and the malevolent figure. I still hear them sometimes, in the dead of night, when the world is silent and I am alone with my thoughts. I wonder if I'll ever truly escape the horrors of that old hotel, or if they will follow me forever, a shadow on my soul. It was supposed to be a simple business trip. I had booked a room at the Grand Mariner Hotel, a towering monolith of glass and steel that loomed over the city skyline. It had the reputation of being luxurious and modern, a far cry from the seedy motels I usually ended up in. I arrived late in the evening, tired and eager for a good night's sleep before my early morning meeting. The lobby was pristine, with marble floors that gleamed under the chandeliers. A young man at the front desk greeted me with a polite smile and checked me in quickly. He handed me a key card for room 1408 on the 14th floor. As I made my way to the elevator, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. It was nothing I could put my finger on, just a slight prickle at the back of my neck. The elevator ride was swift and silent, the soft hum of machinery the only sound. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a deserted hallway. The lighting was dim, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly. My footsteps echoed on the carpeted floor as I walked down the corridor to my room. Room 1408 was at the end of the hallway. I slid the key card into the lock, and the door clicked open. The room was exactly as I had expected, sleek, modern, and impersonal. A king-sized bed dominated the space, with crisp white linens and plush pillows. There was a large window that offered a panoramic view of the city, its lights twinkling in the darkness. I set my suitcase down and started to unpack. As I hung my suit in the closet, I heard a faint sound, like a whisper. I paused, straining to listen. It was gone as quickly as it had come. I shook my head and continued unpacking, chalking it up to the sounds of an old building settling. After a quick shower, I climbed into bed and turned off the lights. The room was plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the city lights filtering through the curtains. I closed my eyes, hoping to drift off quickly, but sleep was elusive. I lay there, tossing and turning, the unease growing stronger. Then I heard it again. A whisper, soft and unintelligible, but undeniably real. I sat up, my heart pounding. The room was silent, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I got out of bed and checked the bathroom, the closet, even under the bed. Nothing. The room was empty. I returned to bed, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But the whispers continued, growing louder and more insistent. They seemed to be coming from the walls, a chorus of voices just out of reach. I turned on the bedside lamp, the light banishing the shadows but not the whispers. I grabbed my phone and called the front desk. The same young man answered, his voice calm and professional. I explained what was happening, feeling foolish as I did. He assured me that no one else had reported anything unusual, but promised to send someone up to check. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find an older man dressed in a hotel uniform. His expression was unreadable as he stepped inside and began to inspect the room. He checked the vents, the windows, even the walls, but found nothing out of the ordinary. He looked at me, his eyes dark and serious. "This hotel has been here for a long time," he said. "Sometimes old buildings make strange noises. If you'd like, I can arrange for you to change rooms." I nodded, grateful for the offer. I packed my things quickly and followed him to another room on the 15th floor. Room 1507. It looked identical to the first room, but it felt different. The air was lighter, the unease diminished. I thanked the man and he left, closing the door quietly behind him. I settled into bed, exhaustion finally taking over. Just as I was about to drift off, I heard it again. The whispering, louder this time and clearer. It was a woman's voice, filled with despair. "Help me, please, help me." I shot out of bed, my heart racing. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. "I'm here," I said, my voice trembling. "What do you want?" There was no response, just the incessant whispering. I felt a cold breeze brush against my skin, even though the windows were closed. The room grew colder, and I could see my breath in the air. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it around the room. The light caught something in the corner, a faint outline of a figure. I blinked, and it was gone. But the whispering remained, growing more desperate. Terrified, I called the front desk again. This time, a different voice answered, a woman's voice. I explained what was happening, and she listened patiently. "I'll send someone up immediately," she said. A few minutes later, there was another knock on the door. I opened it to find the same older man, his expression grim. "We need to leave this room," he said urgently. "Now." We hurried down the hallway, the whispers following us. As we reached the elevator, he turned to me. "This hotel has a history," he said. "Room 1408 and 1507, they are connected. Years ago, a woman died in room 1408 under mysterious circumstances. Some say her spirit haunts these rooms, looking for help." The elevator doors opened and we stepped inside. The whispers faded as we descended, but the chill remained. The man led me to a different floor, a different room. It was smaller, less luxurious, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be away from the whispers. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, the events replaying in my mind. I checked out first thing in the morning, eager to leave the Grand Mariner behind. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me, whispering in the shadows. I never spoke of that night to anyone, but sometimes, in the dead of night, I still hear those whispers, a faint plea for help that chills me to the bone. I had been on the road for hours, my eyes growing heavy as the sun dipped below the horizon. The GPS on my phone led me to the only available lodging for miles, a small, decrepit hotel called the Silverwood Inn. Its flickering neon sign was barely visible through the thick fog that had settled over the countryside. Reluctantly, I pulled into the gravel parking lot and killed the engine. The front desk was manned by an elderly woman with silver hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her smile was polite but cold, her eyes never quite meeting mine. "Room 13 is the only one available," she said, sliding a tarnished key across the counter. I hesitated, but exhaustion won over my reservations. I thanked her and took the key, dragging my suitcase down the dimly lit hallway. Room 13 was at the end of the hall, the number hanging crookedly on the door. The room itself was small and musty, with outdated floral wallpaper peeling at the edges. A single window overlooked the dense woods that surrounded the property, the fog pressing against the glass like a living thing. I shivered, unpacked a few essentials, and decided to take a quick shower to shake off the chill. The bathroom was even more dismal, with cracked tiles and a mirror that seemed to distort my reflection. The water was lukewarm at best, but it helped to wash away the grime of the road. As I stood under the feeble stream, I heard a soft scratching noise coming from the bedroom. I froze, listening intently. The sound stopped, and I chalked it up to the old building settling. After drying off, I changed into my pajamas and crawled into the creaky bed. The sheets felt cold and damp, but I was too tired to care. I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. Sleep came quickly, but it was restless and filled with unsettling dreams. I woke to the sound of footsteps. They were soft, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to hear. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But there was only silence. I reached for my phone, using its light to scan the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but the uneasy feeling remained. I got up and checked the door, making sure it was locked. It was. I peered out the window, but the fog was too thick to see anything beyond the glass. As I climbed back into bed, I heard the footsteps again, this time moving away from my door, down the hall. They were slow and deliberate, fading into the distance. I lay there, wide awake, until exhaustion finally pulled me under. The next morning, I went to the front desk to check out. The same elderly woman was there, her expression unchanged. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, her tone polite but distant. "Not really," I admitted. "I heard some strange noises last night, footsteps mostly." Her smile faltered for a brief moment. "This is an old building. It makes all sorts of noises." I nodded, not entirely convinced, and handed her the key. As I turned to leave, she called out, "Wait." I looked back, and for the first time her eyes met mine. There was something haunted in her gaze. "Did you see anyone?" I shook my head, feeling a chill run down my spine. "No, just the footsteps." She nodded slowly, as if confirming something to herself. "Safe travels," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I left the Silverwood Inn with a sense of relief, but the unease lingered. The drive home was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That night, I had trouble falling asleep. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside my window made me jump. A few days later, I decided to do some research on the Silverwood Inn. What I found sent a shiver down my spine. The hotel had a dark history, with numerous reports of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances. Room 13, in particular, had a reputation for being haunted. Years ago, a young woman named Emily had vanished from that very room. She had been traveling alone, much like I was, and had checked in late at night. She was never seen again. The only clue left behind was her suitcase, neatly packed and left untouched in the room. Since then, guests who stayed in room 13 reported hearing footsteps, whispers, and the feeling of being watched. As I read more, I discovered a photograph of Emily. Her face was eerily familiar, and I realized with a jolt that she resembled the elderly woman at the front desk. I found an old news article about Emily's disappearance, which included a photo of her mother, the hotel's original owner. The resemblance was uncanny. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The woman at the front desk was Emily's mother, still waiting for her daughter to return. The footsteps, the unease, it all made sense now. Emily was still there, trapped in the room where she had vanished. I tried to put it out of my mind, but the experience stayed with me. I never stayed at another hotel without feeling a pang of anxiety. And sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear those same footsteps, slow and deliberate, outside my bedroom door. I tell myself it's just my imagination, but deep down, I know better. The past has a way of lingering, and some spirits are never truly at rest.